Okay. Hi, guys. Today I have Cara Breen, and she is a good friend of mine that I met through Cacique Academy. And she happened to welcome me into her community. And just understanding her and understanding her story has helped me appreciate all the work that she's done for the community that she's welcomed me into, but also just recognizing how amazing we are as women to connect each other and also care for each other on so many different levels. So, this is Cara Breen. Would you like to introduce yourself in any way?
Hey, yeah. Well, welcome to this little chat. I'm so glad that Alexa asked me to do this. I know she has some questions for me today, and just going to provide my perspective and experience. I've been working with women for quite a few years now, mostly in the pregnancy and birth front, but now more just all inclusive, all ages and varieties.
Okay. So I was wondering if you could explain to them a little bit about what a doula is and your first experience being one.
Yeah, so a doula is it's a birth coach, I guess. That's like a more understandable term, but it also translates to birth servant. So doulas provide care in the emotional and supportive front. So they're not medical, they're just supportive, like the best sister that you've ever needed during your birth and pregnancy. And I got started with it a year or so now, originally with the DONA crediting body. And yeah, that's how that got started. Did you have any more questions about doula specific, or do you think I covered that?
No, I think it's good. For the most part, it's just like a midwife type of idea. And would you like to go into a little bit about your education journey and learning to trust your intuition and take a different path?
Yeah, so all through high school, I was an academic, I would say. I didn't have any marks that were lower than 80%. And if they were, I would be so angry at that teacher. And I'd be like, you better,
Me too.
I need this to be over an 80. So like, that was just normal for me. A lot of people knew that. I didn't make a lot of friends in school. Like I had acquaintances, but I wasn't close with anyone because I was so like work driven. I didn't really have time for like the parties and the hangouts. I was just school, and marked. And I would cry if I would get bad marks. I'd be like in the bathroom crying after a test. Like it like really ruled my world. And then when university came around, it was an obvious decision that I was going to university, and I chose medical science because I wanted to be a doctor. A family doctor or OBGYN was the goal. So I went to the University of Western Ontario, and I met some really great people there. But as university began, I realized how actually unprepared I was. Even though I had these high marks in high school, university was nothing like high school. Like I felt so ill prepared. And then my marks were a lot of my confidence. So when I lost that, I kind of lost me. And then it just kind of trickled into this really negative, bad, dark mental health space. So things weren't good. And I was talking to my now husband at the time, who was out west working. And so he was like helping me through a lot of this. But ultimately what it came down to was my decision to leave university. It just wasn't for me. Sorry. I was just not doing well. I couldn't sleep. And then when I was in class, I was sleeping in class. Like it was just this bad mix. So I was going to some mental health counselors to kind of talk about things, and they were great. Honestly, I told my story to one of the girls, and she said, I think your heart knows exactly what you need to do here. And that was to like leave university and go out west to where my husband was, boyfriend at the time. So that happened there, and that was like such a big step for me to do that. And I think what helped is the first summer that I was in university, I went out west as like a why not, I have 4 months off for summer, so I'm going to go try something new. And that kind of like opened me up a little bit to things, which kind of made it worse when I came back for my second year, because then I felt like everyone out there was living their lives and they were traveling and they were doing all these things, and I was stuck like doing something I hated for a long-term goal that was 7 or 8 years out, that like the pathway just didn't resonate to the end goal. So then with that, I started traveling a lot more, and we went to Asia, and now we've kind of done like a circle like around the world, which is awesome and amazing. And I've seen so many things, so many like beautiful things. And always what's stuck out to me is women and how the culture changes, you know, like something really foreign one time I remember was on a bus, and there was an Asian woman, and she was just breastfeeding her baby, and she wasn't hiding anything. She was just going about her day, and all the men around her weren't weird about it. No one moved away from her. It was just so normal in that culture that when a woman was breastfeeding, that's what she was doing. It wasn't anything sexual. So you get like little tidbits of that. And I think I did still want to stay in school. Like I wanted to go back to do midwifery, but midwifery is extremely competitive. It is like that in the States, but especially in Canada, there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump in, like a lot. And that's also discouraging as someone who knows that they're smart and that they have the ability, but to be constrained by finances and also just like rules. It was just like didn't make sense to me. It didn't resonate. So that kind of stopped me in my tracks. It was discouraging. So I was like, maybe I can still work with pregnant women just as a doula. And I did that. I've been going to births, and I love that. And I love all the things that I've learned and the people that I've, you know, got to meet through it and what I've learned about birth. But there were some things that I didn't love about it, and we'll get into that probably later. Just because you're within the medical system still. And yeah, that's kind of like how it's led me down this path. But again, like through those travels, I've met people who have had births in their homes with traditional midwives, like indigenous, like not even English speaking midwives that live on the land and still work with the women. And that's kind of like shaped where I am now and how I want to help women as well.
Was there any particular moment that made you realize how passionate you were about being a doula or getting into taking care of pregnant women, or even like the birth process? Like, was there anything that particularly stood out to you?
Well, I think I've always loved birth. I told you this story before, Alexa, where my mom like blocked me off TLC's Baby Story because I was like watching so much as a young girl, and she was like a little worried about whether that was like healthy or not, which of course I don't think there was any problem with it, but you know, as a mom you worry. And yeah, so there was that part. But then like I think I always had the idea that I wanted to work with women and specifically around pregnancy, and I'm not sure exactly like where that rooted from. Part of me is like I think I came to this earth with it already because like it's so strong. Yeah. But like being in Colombia with our friends who had the baby at their house with a traditional midwife, being around them, that couple who were providing us with a workaway experience, they were such role models. Like the way that they were acting and how they lived their life was it was in a way that they didn't have to tell you how to do anything. It's just like they showed you how they live, and then it like inspired you to like be yourself and be like out there and just do what like feels good. And then with the birth, and like I was looking after their baby that they had just had, and her experience, that really I was just like, okay, when I go back to Canada, like I need to actually do something like with this. Like I'm not going to be a midwife through the normal way, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to do something because I can. And then I think that was the moment. Like as soon as I was done, I felt so inspired from that trip and from being around them that it just made like complete sense. And I'm pretty sure I like registered for the doula course like as soon as I got to Canada.
That's awesome. Um, I was wondering if we could dive a little bit deeper into your experiences in medical school that specifically led to you feeling like it wasn't meant for you.
In medical
Not,
science?
yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, again, like when I first went there, I was very much, I had the attitude like, I'm here to learn and I'm not here to make friends. So like that already like puts you at a disadvantage. Like I would get super annoyed when we would have the like hall, because I was in residence. So I would get like really annoyed if we would have like these group meetings that were like taking time away from like me studying or whatever. And I also had roommates that were really loud and noisy. And two of them were in social science, which like is usually the opposite of sciences because their classes tend to be in the afternoon, whereas the science classes are always right in the early morning. So because of that, they were up later because they got to sleep in longer. And that like was so hard. That was so hard with the mindset of like, I'm here to succeed. It made me have no fun. Like I was not fun. My roommates were like, oh, it's her. Like they didn't love me, you know, around like now they've like come to understand me. So we have like a good relationship. But at first it was probably definitely rocky, although I didn't really care what they thought at the time. And I didn't like when you went home and you came back from like Christmas or Thanksgiving that no one really had anything to talk about. Like there was no like life things. It was just like, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm good. How was your break? It was good. And there was just like nothing growing. Like everything's just like really stagnant. And just like the stress that everybody's under, it's just like this big competition, and every single person that you meet is like, I'm going to be a doctor, and it's not like a community like group thing. Like even when you're studying with other people, it's still really seen, especially the medical sciences program, that you're just trying to one up. Like you'll help people, but not enough that it would put them ahead of you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's important.
Yeah. So like things like that just like did not resonate with me. It didn't feel good. And it was like reflected in my health, like my mental health. Like I was just couldn't sleep at night, and not being able to sleep just would make me cry because I needed to be up at 8 a.m. So it was just like this, like really bad downward spiral.
I think a lot of people resonate with that, just like being stuck in a job and realizing how much it weighs on you when you're not passionate or aligned with the work that you're doing. I think it shows on people outwardly, but they can feel it internally as well. So I know that we talked a little bit about you working in a hospital, correct? So I was wondering, like, in that setting, was there anything in particular that made you decide that you would rather work as a doula?
So I worked in hospitals as a doula.
Oh.
Yeah.
Look at me learning things. Would you like to talk a little bit about those experiences?
So a lot it's very common for women to have babies in hospitals, right? Like we're kind of like, it's all over the media. When you have a baby, you go to a hospital. Your mom probably went to a hospital, so you're going to go to a hospital. It's just like kind of that, it's just ingrained like in our culture and our society. And so when I first began my doula work, a lot of the women that I work with are going to hospitals because that's the majority of people. And there's kind of like women who aren't going to hospitals, not necessarily at all, but either have had a baby before, or they like have a little bit more knowledge on like how that works, and they feel safer doing it. So that's why they do the home birth, and then they might not necessarily have a doula, although many do. But either way, I was just reaching out to random people who I knew to get some experience. And I was so grateful that they welcomed me into their birth because it's such like an intimate, experience. So yeah, I've been to a few hospitals, and I got to see a variety of different examples. And I've even been to some hospitals for friends' births where I wasn't there as a doula at all, but I was just kind of seeing what was going on. And yeah, like there's things that sometimes come up that are like patterns that I've noticed. And if you don't understand physiological birth, which is like how birth works from your hormones, and like if it was left alone, how it would happen, as opposed to actively managed birth, which happens a lot in hospitals, then you'd have to know a little bit about that to see these things happening. But I mean, like all the staff have always been super pleasant. Like the nurses, the doctors, like everyone there, they're doing their job and they're doing it well, and they're doing it based on their education and their abilities. However, like birth does tend to be treated as an illness when you're in a hospital. Like you come to give birth in hospital because there's something wrong with you, and that something wrong with you is that you need to get a baby out. But that's not actually a problem. That's like a normal thing that your body knows how to deal with. So yeah, like I see like a lot of chains of active management in birth. So like starting with an induction can lead to which is like Pitocin, like synthetic oxytocin, which is a hormone that helps your uterus contract and can start labor. But when you start even with that first intervention, then women are more likely to want an epidural, even if they've decided like, no, absolutely no drugs. Those contractions from Pitocin are so painful that it's almost like not fair to a woman to not let her get an epidural with those Pitocin contractions. And then she gets those contractions in that epidural. And then things sometimes go a little wonky because you're in bed. So you're not moving. So the baby sometimes doesn't move in the right way. So then sometimes there's like a threat of like, if this baby doesn't do this, then you're going to have a C-section. So there's a correlation between all those interventions causing more interventions, which could lead to a C-section, which is a major abdominal surgery. And that's another thing that's like really mainstream now, but it's still like a major abdominal surgery. So I've seen stuff like that. And actually there was a quote even that the moment that a woman leaves her house, her birth has been interfered with, like that normal like matrix of like hormones, because when she's in her home and she's in her nest and she's not interrupted by bright lights and like anxiety, her body is more likely to follow the normal like progression of labor. So I thought that was really neat too. But these are just things like I've kind of seen, and when there's lights on in the hospital, like it's kind of hard to avoid that. When women come to give birth, there is also, and probably many women have experienced this, you get to the hospital and then your labor stops. You were at home, you were laboring, it was fine, and now you're at the hospital because you drove there, you're getting poked around. Maybe you feel uncomfortable because you're not in your home anymore and your labor stops. So then they will start with Pitocin if it doesn't start naturally. But even the pressure to not start naturally can cause you to not progress, It's like using the washroom. It's like how we feel way more comfortable when it's like private and we know no one's listening and we're like alone. It's the exact same with birth. So if you had someone like looking at you and like putting their fingers around like your business, you probably would not do a great job at going to the washroom.
So from a doula's perspective, what would be the ideal birth setting? If not around like bright lights and someone poking at you and watching your goods, what's the most comfortable environment or comfortable way to give birth?
Yeah. So firstly, I want to say like the hospital still has its place in birth. Like there are sometimes true emergencies that like a hospital is needed and they do amazing work. But ideally for someone who like doesn't have any risk factors and is giving birth, ideally it would be at home, or it would be in that place where you feel most secure, where you've had time to nest and like kind of get into your flow, and where your bathroom is, and where your your sink is and where your food is. Like, it's all there, so that you would have your food, because in hospitals that's something you don't really have. You can have water, and sometimes they won't even let you have food just in case you need surgery. But when you're at home, you have those things. The lighting is dim. You have your smells that are comfortable to you, so you're wearing your clothes or no clothes, which you're way more comfortable doing at home than in a hospital. And yeah, you just like have your comforts. Like, if you think about like having a flu or not feeling well, you don't want to be at a friend's house like when you're sick and trying to like feel comfortable. You know, you like having your bathroom there. You like knowing that you can throw up anywhere and like you're not inconveniencing anyone because it's your own place. So it's just like really like, it's really primal. Like, it's like animals. It's, if you've ever seen like a cat or a dog give birth, they do the same thing. They go to like where it feels safe to them, and they will like dig a little nest in their blankets, and they will like go where it's quiet, and they're not touched, and they don't really want to be touched, and they just do their thing. So that's exactly, we're just like animals.
What is for anybody interested in maybe looking into being a doula, what is like the process look like of, it sounds weird, I feel like I need to use like a professional term, but like asking to be somebody's doula? Is it generally like the doula reaching out, or would it be the mother or the family like reaching out to find a doula?
So there's actually a lot of different doula regulating bodies that you can sign up for. DONA is a big one, but there's many. And they all have like their different like niches. So like how my certification would have looked like is you do just a weekend course, and then you start reaching out and asking to go to births, which is crazy, I know, but that's how it's set up. There's not really like an apprenticeship where you ask an already experienced doula to work with them, because again, birth is so intimate that even to have one person there that is kind of a stranger is a lot. So to have that plus a student, and by the way, this happens all the time in hospitals for student doctors and nurses, so they do ask you, but you know, it's still awkward to even have to say no, I don't want a student watching my birth. But yeah, so that's the certification process. You do that, and then there's like an essay, you write down your experiences. There's like a few other activities that they make you do, and then they make you submit all your paperwork, and then you're certified. And then what was the second part of that question about?
I don't remember the second part. I think it was just, you know,
I know. Sorry. About reaching out. So yeah. Generally it's the doula who's reaching out to the parents at first. Mm-hmm. Just to say like, hey, I am training to be a doula. And it's generally someone you know. Like, a stranger is probably going to be like, that's nice, but no, you're not coming. But yeah, you ask your friends, people that you know, like, can I attend your birth? This would really help me educationally. And they will say yes, or they will say no. And it's really important to respect, even if they're your friend and they say no, because it's their birth. So like, that's a big thing too. Being a doula is not about you and the birth that you attend. It's about the mother. So you can't be greedy about, like, how could she not let me come to her birth? Because it's like, it's not about you as a doula. And yeah, and then once that happens, generally, like, you know, the mother felt supported, she had a good experience with you, then she will pass that on to her friends, and she will say, you know, I had a doula for the first time and it was like really good, and she's just learning, so maybe she's not as expensive, so she's more affordable, and yeah, like, I highly recommend it. And then there's like word of mouth, which would happen more if you stay in one place. Mm-hmm. Because obviously if you're moving around all the time, then you're not going to be able to build that community. But that's generally how you get like the best connections in doula, because you want them to be personal, because birth is personal.
Is it common for doulas to stick around before like the birth, like just like for the pregnancy process and helping the the mother prepare for her birth and make sure that she's in the best position to give birth to a baby?
Yeah, doulas have like a really big role, and sometimes when you see their fees, you're like, whoa, that's a lot to just come to my birth. But truly, a doula should be doing way more than that, and a lot of doulas do offer a wide scope. So a lot of people, including myself, I will meet with you for free, and we'll just see if we're a good fit. Because just because I'm a doula and you're pregnant doesn't mean that you want me to come. Like, that's the nice thing. Like, it's not just like there's one doctor and you have to have that doctor. There's so many doulas that you can pick, and it's really important that you feel good with that person. So that initial free consult is really important. So you do that, and then I usually meet with them 2 or 3 times before the birth, and we just talk about everything. We just talk about how they're feeling, what they want their birth to look like. We talk about some methods. We discuss pain management, like whether they want that, whether they don't. If there's a code word, do they like to be touched, to be comforted, like normally? Because some people know that. Do they have any abuse that's happened in their past that might affect how they handle birth or having other people around? So there's a lot of communication in person. And then as well, doulas are usually like on 24/7, like alert, waiting for text messages. Like if you wake up at 3 a.m. and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't felt my baby kick, then they can be the first ones that you like, they message that. And a doula could say, actually, that's quite normal, or try again and do this. And then if you still haven't felt anything, call your doctor. Like, it's kind of like that relationship of having someone that you know is always there for you and is just there for your birth. Because a lot of people in your life during your pregnancy are usually family members, and they are like really concerned about you, but also about themselves as well. So sometimes they have birth trauma that they can't handle, like you sharing your experience, because negative things come up for them that they can't help but like bring out to you. So so there's like that kind of dynamic, and texting and being available. And then of course when the baby is born, like a doula is on call for a month, because babies can come 2 weeks before their due date, they can come on their due date, or 2 weeks after. It's anywhere from 38 weeks to 42 weeks is normal. So it's a lot of commitment that a doula like puts into being with your birth. They and you know, you may also have your doula come over and help you set up the pool even weeks before like you're about to give birth. They're literally there for you for whatever you need. And then there's a whole other side of doula called the postpartum doula. And as a birth doula, you can do both, but there's also certification for postpartum specifically. And that's where after the birth, you come into the home and you help look after that baby, so that, or the mother, not the baby. The mother looks after the baby mostly, but maybe you look after the baby while she sleeps and then bring the baby back to her when the baby needs to nurse, or you clean the house a bit, or help look after other children, or make the family meals like that. That's what a postpartum doula is. So they do a lot. And as well, like the birth doula, like even immediately after the birth, I find that the responsibility to the birth doula is to stay there at least until the baby has latched for the first time with breastfeeding, unless they're not, they've chosen not to breastfeed, but then waiting for like the first feed, and even providing a meal for the family and making sure that they're settled in and taken care of. And then I take some photos for them as well. And that's it.
That being said, I think it's amazing that you chose to go towards a line of work that's so driven towards, I don't want to say working for other people, but making sure people feel comfortable and are confident in their process, especially in childbirth. I've never experienced it, but there's a lot of responsibility with holding a baby in your body for 9 months or so. So, yeah, that's really amazing. And I'm so inspired by your drive to help women in so many ways. And especially like you said, leaving college, because of course me being a college student, being the nerd that I was, that wasn't super like didn't have a lot of like cliques and stuff in high school, like I get that, I get needing that satisfaction from education, but then realizing not going towards what was expected of you led you to something so much greater, and I'm so excited to see where you head. Would you like to tell everybody about the course that you will be taking soon?
Yeah, that was just going to lead into that actually, because so I've signed up for a traditional midwifery course, which is 2 years. They call it a school because it kind of is a school. Like there's assignments, there's an exam, and a lot of teaching. So yeah, it's traditional midwifery. So it's also known as like midwifery, because it's not really legal and it's not really licensed, but it's the old way of thinking, and it's like really like woman directed care. And I'm really hoping that that's going to like broaden the way that I can provide for women in my doula scope. Yeah, and I'm really excited about it.
I'm excited for you. Is there anything in particular you'd like to share before we end the interview?
Just that any women out there, just to make sure that, you know, you can reach out to someone who can give you the truth, and that will help you, you know, that will be acting in your best interest, not in like the state's best interest or like their medical licensing best interest. Because there's a lot of information out there that can be like really helpful and great, and it's just important to have all of it so that you can make choices based on like the whole picture, and not just like little parts that have been passed down to you or by either family or also society, because it's going to affect your birth. And like birth is all about community. When you give birth, you start a community. So if we are not like bringing that, if that's not a positive experience, then our whole world isn't a positive experience, because that's where we all start.
I love that you said that. I think that it's part of the reason I started any of this is just to say, you know, we have, as women, we have had so many social constructs, whether they pertain to us or align to us or not, that are pushed onto us. And I just think it's so important for women to follow what feels right to them and what feels right to their body and to their minds. And for you to be helping provide that type of resource if they're not looking to go the traditional route with birth is amazing. So thank you so much, Cara.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there particularly a social media handle you would like to send out in case somebody would like to get in touch with you?
I have one made, but because I'm in the middle of a business course. We're just rebranding and everything, but my handle on Instagram, and it is there, so you can follow it now, although nothing is posted just yet. It is Wombs and Moons Holistic.
I'm so happy to watch this unfold.
I'm really excited. I should have everything up and running. My goal is by the full moon, so June 5th.
Super exciting. Thank you.
Yeah.